All right, today I'm sitting down with Andy Armstrong. He is the regional sales manager for the Midwest. So he's in the same position that I'm in. I'm in the South, he's in the Midwest. And what we do is cover all of our dealerships that are out selling our product line. And we're the main line of communication between our dealership and the manufacturer who we work for, Vac-Con. So I'm going to sit down with Andy, go through some stories, and just talk shop for a little bit.
Some of the stories we can't tell.
You don't get a second chance to make a good first impression.
Now I actually
Now you know me.
Now I know you.
Yeah.
All right, Andy. How's it going?
Good, John. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for sitting down with me.
VacconJohn, I should say.
VacconJohn show, baby. So when you come in last night?
Got in last night, yeah. Mike and I, we fly to Orlando, so we did the direct flight. As you know, we're professional.
Well, no finger Mike and Andy Armstrong always fly into Orlando, get that direct flight, and then drive up from Orlando to Jacksonville every time we have our meeting. So, no, man, it's good sitting down with you. So you've been with Vac-Con now for 13 years.
Yeah, right at 13 years will be, my daughter was born in April, and I started 2 weeks after my daughter was born.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
you had the different baptism by fire. You had a
Little bit.
Was it your first kid too?
Very much so,
So you
yes.
had your first kid,
and only.
and then 2 weeks later you started a new job at Vac-Con.
Correct.
So let's hear about how this all started. What were you doing beforehand? How did you get rolling in with the Vac-Con product, and what was your timeline like coming into that 13-year span?
Yeah, so similar to yourself, I mean, I tell people I was Stevie Wonder to the industry. I mean, I really knew nothing about the sewer industry. Didn't recognize vacuum trucks on the road, none of that stuff. I was in the automotive business for about 20 years. Hurts to say that long.
Yeah.
But 20 years before my father actually got me in the business as well. He had built positive displacement blowers and was a master PD specialist.
Talk with the microphone like a fist from your face there.
For years. You got it.
So your dad was rebuilding PD blowers.
Correct. Remanufacturing and rebuilding PD blowers. He had done some for Vac-Con, and that's kind of what brought me into this business.
Where was this? Kansas City area?
Kansas City area, correct. I'm born and raised in Kansas City, or the Midwest there. And so when he was proposed a position with a company that it was owned by Vac-Con to run service for them, we looked into the company, did a little bit of research online, realized it was a good employee-owned business, and he went to work for those guys, and that's how I got into the business.
That was Red Equipment at the time, right?
That was Red Equipment, which
was Bill still the owner that Vac-Con bought Red Equipment, and Bill worked through there. Was it still him as the head guy?
Correct. So back then, and you'll speak with Bryce Rieger, who's our boss and the national sales manager. He was in my role before.
Yeah.
So he was my regional sales manager when I started. Before I started, we had a dealership in Missouri that covered Kansas and Missouri as well. And the owner was in his late 90s and getting ready to go, or getting ready to pass, or at least retire. So the idea was, let's start our own dealership. Bill Akins was running a service business doing industrial service in Kansas City. So they already had the location, they had the building. So Bryce and Bill had agreed to kind of start the Red Equipment line or dealership, and that's where it all started.
So he had the background on the service side, which is obviously one of the huge keys to a dealership. He had that background in the service. And so what were you do? So you were in the car industry. So you were automotive industry, and you were in sales? Or?
I was running operations for an auto auction. At the time, I turned wrenches my entire life, so my background was more mechanical than anything else.
Service side.
Never been in the sales business before. When I started, or when my father went to work for Red Equipment as a service manager, the idea was, hey, maybe I'll end up over there with him, or in that zone of work for Vac-Con. However, it was just a couple months later they had an opening for sales and proposed it to me, and like we discussed, I had a pregnant wife at home. which you can't necessarily jump ship and play Russian roulette with health insurance. So, so I waited, and they actually waited for me, which was great. And 2 weeks after she was born, I started selling vacuum trucks.
That's cool. So your dad went over to Red, and he was what, like a service manager there?
Service manager, correct.
So he was service manager there. How long was he there until he retired? Was he there till he retired?
He was. He retired 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, I guess,
wow.
in October.
He's been there for a while.
Yeah. He did 11 years with Red Equipment and
That's
Vac-Con.
cool.
Yep.
So you had a little. It's funny, even talking with No Finger Mike earlier. Talking with some of the guys around the dealerships, all the family stuff that's tied. So you had some overlap with your dad at Red
A
Equipment.
little bit myself.
So
yeah.
you were calling him up. Hey, I got this truck. You got to put this thing towards the front here. You're
It's
talking
double-edged sword, right? Right.
Yeah.
So there's the good, bad, and the ugly. Even though we love our family members and we love each other, we're still got a job to do. So handling business is one of those things.
So you had a little bit of overlap with your dad at Red. So you were working at Red Equipment as a sales representative for them, and you're selling to the end user.
Correct.
And then you transitioned to Vac-Con. What was the timeline there? What was it like that?
Yeah, so like I say, I've been with Vac-Con for 13 years, always underneath the Vac-Con name or working for Vac-Con.
Yeah.
I did my first 6 years as a regional sales rep for Red Equipment in Kansas and Missouri. And then it was 6 years in when I was proposed the regional manager position and took the role that we both have now.
Yeah, that's cool. So you got your baseline knowledge from actually, and this is the unique thing. I talked to No Finger Mike Plakia, and he had his background knowledge. He kind of worked at a dealership for a little while, but then he gained a lot of his knowledge being a product specialist too. So he kind of jumped over being a demo technician at Vac-Con, started as a product specialist, cut his teeth on that. Where you kind of had a little bit of a different thing where for 6 years, you're actually interacting with the end users, selling them Vac-Ons. So instead of, learning the product from the manufacturer, you had to learn it from selling it to the end user. So it's kind of like almost a different way where you learned things from a different end, right?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I was very fortunate to have the support and the camaraderie or the brotherhood of the Vac-Con guys. I know you guys talked about a little bit about, the connection we all have together, and we get up and we spend more time with the people we work with every day than we do really our own family. When we're home, we spend a lot of time asleep. So it means so much to have those people to help give you that knowledge. And I was just a sponge. Yeah. I was the give me the keys guy. I had the mechanical background, so I wasn't afraid of that side of it. And my big thing was, in business and even in sales, which I had never done any sales before, my big thing was I always wanted to provide something. Right. You want to be a resource to your customers. So gaining that knowledge, just as you have done in a short time, right, and being that resource to your customer, my big thing was give me the keys. Let me out there. Let's get muddy. Let's turn it on. Let's break it. Let's do all the things that we need to do, and so that I could gain that knowledge and pass it to the next customer.
Well, and it's funny, like we were talking about how our job, it's so different every day. And when you're describing this to someone, it's kind of like, are you in a blue collar job, or are you like a salesman? What's the deal here? Well, I always say it's a light blue collar. Yeah, we're on the sales side, we're on the computer, but we're also running the trucks every day. So your big deal starting up was being hands on, going and working the truck with the customer and doing everything that what they wanted to do with the truck to show them that it's a workhorse, pretty much.
Absolutely. I mean, just as you have done, you really you need to know.
Yeah.
Just reading book knowledge and finding out those things, anybody can do that, and it is beneficial. But actually getting out there and learning by failures. In all reality, I tell guys nowadays, if there's anything I could, don't be afraid to fail. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
So my big thing was getting out there and doing it. And you're right, it's a light blue collar job. Some days it's one way, some days it's the other.
Right.
So we get
today
a little bit
we're all nice, wearing our nice clothes.
Yeah. We get a little bit of both, which is fun too.
Yeah.
So that is a real joy of the experience of what we do. I mean, we get up every day and we work hard and we work long hours and we travel a lot. I'm sure we'll talk about some, but the benefit is when you enjoy it and you like the people that surround you and like the people that you work with, gosh, it makes all the difference in the world.
So I know the way I started, I relied heavily on certain people to give me the knowledge to where I was able to kind of get a jump start from people. When you were at Red Equipment, Vac-Con at that point, selling to end users, who were the people that you had to lean on, and who helped you through the knowledge process? Who was giving you the keys, and who was helping you? Hey, when you're doing this demo, do it this way, make it look easy. Who were those people for you when you were jump starting the whole process?
Yeah, so I tell my sales reps this now. For me, obviously, some of the direct people I was involved with were Bill Akins, with Red Equipment. Obviously, the bunch or the core group of guys here, that brought me in, whether it was Brad Zangel in parts that I could call at any time, or Mike Selby, the other regional managers, Mike Pilecchia, the Mark Wardlaws, and people that really I just hit it off with early on and that brought me in. One of the huge ones for me was Daryl Lesage. Daryl was a great mentor to me as far as how to treat people and how to do business, and I still hold some of those lessons that I learned from him and use them every day.
Yeah. So it's funny, like you coming from turning wrenches and that being your background, I was like, honestly, kind of the opposite of that. I'm not turning wrenches. I was out selling construction equipment. I had like a little bit of a sales background for myself. Like, I was selling things, but I was never turning wrenches. I was never, out operating a 320 excavator all the time. You had that background knowledge. So then those guys that helped you through were really more about like strategy, sales strategy sides, and service issues that you're trying to
or even how to make your own identity, right? I mean, because let's face it, we're in the communication business, and that is what we do, right? So I had never ran a tractor. I had never run a vacuum truck or driven anything with a CDL. Of course, I'd driven around an auto lot, an auction lot. So operating any of that heavy machinery was not in my repertoire, other than being mechanically inclined. Right?
So
I
give you
didn't
that
necessarily
baseline.
have that fear. On the sales side, it was really more of, and back to your first question of, who those people were that helped me. I tell my guys, just look to your John Mosleys, look to your Mike Pilecchias, look to your regional manager, whether it's Frank Ionati with Hughes or Al Milley or some of these other guys, because those are the guys that really taught me everything I know. John Grove was my Hughes rep, because a lot of us sold, back then I sold Vac-Cons as well as camera systems, as well as street sweepers. Raymond Massey was a big one for me that took me in early on. And so one thing I learned early on, and maybe it was Bill Akins, I believe, that told me this. He said, take a little bit of Raymond and take a little bit of John Grove and take a little bit of John Mosley or whomever your reps may be. You learn things from them, but then you put it with a lot of yourself.
And that kind of builds your identity or your theme of how you present the product to people.
It makes you who you are, and just being yourself really in this business, I think, is the most important thing. And getting out there and connecting to people. People can see through phonies from a mile away. So treat people right, and it comes around.
Well, and being the authentic side on the sales side, it's like, I had a buddy that's in medical sales, and he's like, well, I could hide pretty much anything being in sales. I've got a good poker face. Well, it's like, well, that's not really sales. In reality, what sales is, you're just being authentic. You gotta be honest and transparent with everybody. It's kind of those weird things that people think of salesmen a certain way. I have grown in the Vac-Con side of things and kind of realized that that's not really what it's about. It's about being yourself and just building that identity and theme from the different people you learn from. So I learned from Selby, I learned from Bryce, I learned from Phil a little bit, and those little process, they all have their little different way of doing things, and you just got to merge them all together and kind of build your own deal. But you got to be yourself, and you can't go out there and do fibs and stuff.
It sounds really difficult. Trying to keep stories straight and not be genuine, and so it really does. It helps you rest your head heavy on a pillow at night, and you earn customers. You deal with the ups, you deal with the downs, and you hit them head on, and people respect that.
So when you were at Red and you were selling to end users, what was your territory like? What was the build out of the geographical area?
Yeah, so originally I covered Kansas.
Okay.
We had all 4 product lines in Kansas, and then eventually that evolved into Missouri as well.
So you covered like Kansas and Missouri at one point,
Kansas and half of Missouri. Yes.
That's a big territory for an end user sales rep, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at it population wise, it's not considerable.
Geographically, it's pretty big.
geographically, but definitely. So I did a lot of travel before.
Yeah.
Even when I was doing territory sales or as a territory sales rep for Red, like you say, I would leave on Mondays, and you can't go across Kansas. It's 8 hours to cross Kansas from tip to tip. So
that's what I was getting into, is exactly that. So that transition from being an end user sales rep to being a regional manager at a manufacturer, the travel thing's got to change. But if you were traveling that much already, I mean, it kind of just comes with it, right?
that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you have the same job as me. We're on the road all the time. Pretty much Monday through Friday, we're traveling. We get the home reset on the weekends, and you're back on the road again for the most part, So those guys that are covering, a large metropolitan area, like somebody that's covering the New York City or the Miami or, Las Vegas, that tight area, it's a little bit different because you're traveling a day here, a couple nights here. We're gone all the time. So you didn't have a huge adjustment there, but tell me what it's like in this type of job. Are you completely, is it a livelihood at this point, or is it something you still adjust with day in, day out? It's kind of like, well, I got to do this here, this there.
I would miss it if it was gone tomorrow. Like you say, of course, my wife at home does a great job. She takes care of things, and I'm gone a lot.
Yeah.
But when I'm there for a week or so, it's like, where are you headed?
That's what we were saying the last time.
You're going to give me a little breath here, You're kind of interrupting our flow, but you're right. It was driving before. Now it's a lot more flying. So I cover 16 states in the Midwest now. So it's definitely a bigger footprint. However, it's the same stuff. I have, like you say, my toiletry bags, things like that are all separate. I can cut and run in an instant.
Yeah.
If you said, sometimes my plans change before I dry off and the towel hits the floor.
Yeah.
In the morning, on the morning shower. So your stuff is ready to rock. And
that's something that, like, a lot of people, I mean, people listening to this might not realize, is that you might get a call and say, hey, we got a deal going on down in Fargo, North Dakota, and it's going to happen in the next 3 days. It's like, well, all right. I mean, I'm booked for a month, but now I've got to figure out how to get to Fargo in the next couple of days.
Yes.
And it's almost like, there's first responders out there, and their jobs are extremely important. I'm not saying that we're near that, but I'm saying that sometimes I feel like I'm gonna, all right, response unit, we gotta get to Miami, or you gotta get to Beaufort, South Carolina. Yeah, I gotta go.
Yep.
And that's something where end user sales reps are like that. I'm sure that there's people like that throughout sales all over the industry and service everywhere, but it's just one thing that people don't think about.
It's a bit of a chess match, right?
Yeah.
For me, I was much like yourself, very ambitious, right? So I wanted to learn, I wanted to know, and I wanted to be out there. I also felt like, as much as it hurt in the beginning, being on the road was productive, not only during work hours, but after hours.
Yep.
So spending time with the people to gain the knowledge, whether it was dinners or whatnot, or even just being in my own room by myself doing research, and hammering out work. You hate to say it, but going home at 4 o'clock every day, and
you can never get anything done.
Like, I would never get anything
I
done.
always joke around, and I tell people there's no place where I get more work done than in the room 237 of a Hilton Garden Inn. I'm in there. I said 237 like it's The Shining. I don't know why that number came to me out of any other number. Right. But when I'm in that room and I turn the TV off and I'm on my computer and there's no distractions at all, that's, part of our job. We're out during the day. We go back to that hotel. We're knocking that stuff out there.
We do.
And that's the place where I get, when I'm home, it doesn't happen that way.
No.
And there's not, because I also know you're a grass guy and a motorcycle guy.
Yeah.
So when you're home, you're like, ooh, I could go out and put some nice lanes in my grass there too, while I'm on the phone calling people. But then I'm going to go back and knock the stuff out on the computer, because there's just so much to be done when you're home too.
It happens, but there's that divide where you really do try to say, and I learned this one, and it was early on from, it was Raymond Massey, actually.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, traveling on the road is one thing. He said, I still do this to this day. He'll get a kick if he ever hears this. But he said, when I come home, I immediately unpack my bag. That's the first thing I do.
Yep.
You unpack your bag, you're home. On Sunday night, I pack my bag. Now, of course, like you say, it's all geared up. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
It's just my fresh clothes that I'm putting in.
Yeah.
But that kind of draws those lines of, I am home now, and I'm going to do home things, and I'm going to focus on home.
Yeah.
Same thing goes for hobbying or things like that. Even during COVID and some things, I remember getting a kick out of people, whether you get on a Teams call or whatever it may be, and I would be dressed for business, and you know how we dress. I mean, it's business casual, I guess you would say, but.
Yeah, if I'm working, I'm not wearing blue jeans, but it's Sunday, so I felt like
we'll let it slide. But for me, there was never a day I would wear basketball shorts. Not working.
Yep.
People are like, oh, you just laid back in your PJs, working on the computer on a day when you're at the home office. And I could never operate that way.
Yeah.
For me, it was a mentality of, I get up, I get dressed, I go downstairs to the office, I go to work.
Yeah, it's like you're formalizing the headspace, and
Absolutely.
You're starting getting taken off the runway for work because you put the clothes on. Now it's go time.
Absolutely.
I get it.
But it does never stop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's one thing that in the sales industry, and I enjoy it. You get to learn to love the rat race. It never stops.
Yeah.
We're constantly thinking about how we can approach things differently, and you go to bed thinking about it. You wake up thinking about it. It's what we do.
Yep. No, that's cool. So one thing I've been asking the guys, one of the best questions that I come up with, because I love the stories that come out of it, is the dirtiest demo you've been on. So we are always out working the trucks and whatnot. So it doesn't have to be like, sanitary sewer nasty. It could be hydrovac or anything. Where one of those times where you're, out of your comfort zone. You're like, man, I am a mess, and I've got to go get on a flight. What's one situation that you've found yourself in that could be a little funny, dirty job story?
Whew. There's plenty. Fortunately, I've never had to fly with sewage on me.
Yeah.
Okay. I can remember one time where I utilized a shower.
Yeah.
At the municipal facility to clean up. They had one in the back.
In their locker room.
I literally used theirs to get cleaned up because nobody wants to be that guy sitting next to people on an airplane smelling like raw sewage.
Yeah.
But I did do a demo once that was pretty rough, and we cleaned a lift station that I don't think it had ever been cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they were putting us to the test, and it was definitely demanding job. The worst part was we had designed a new thing inside the debris tank that didn't. It was kind of a prototype, we'll say, our air routing system inside the tank, and it ended up collecting a lot of these rags and things that we all see that go down the toilet, like you say.
Flushable wipes.
People don't understand that this stuff never goes away. It doesn't just disappear. So it was all kind of clogged all over this thing, and I'm trying to clean it out in front of the customer and trying to, of course, make it look fairly smooth. And I'm explaining, hey, this is something new we're trying, and it's not necessarily working out so great right now. So I had it all over me, and halfway in the debris tank, and I just remember being covered in it. And they were looking at me like, well, this guy's pretty dedicated. And that was when I used the shower, actually, to clean up afterwards.
It's funny when you get yourself. Sometimes when I go out to the demos and I'm like prepared for that, and I'm wearing my cowboy boots that are waterproof. I've got my $30 pants on because if they're toast, they're toast. I'm not worried about it. I'm not wearing like a fancy button down. I've got a golf shirt on. It's disposable. It's not nothing crazy. I may have like a little rain jacket on. Those demos, I always find like I'm relatively clean at the end. It's fine. But then when I'm wearing my dress shoes and I've got my nicer pants on, I'm wearing the nice button down that I don't want to wear, and then they're like, oh yeah, we're going to take you to a place we call SeaWorld because it's the biggest lift station we think in 100 square miles.
It's when it's least expected.
That's when it's nasty.
It's never great when the guys all look around. You're in an environment and the guys all look around and go, now where's that one line that we never wanted to clean with our own truck?
Yeah, we're going to take this guy there.
Outside of the horse feed plant, and you're like, oh my goodness.
Oh man.
Right, well.
I had one, and it's a funny aside. One of my funny dirty stories here. I was with Kenny Hollins in Virginia, Kenny's got this South Virginia accent, which I love to imitate, And God, I've learned so much from this guy. And I'm out demoing with him. We had a hydrovac job, and we're going out, and it was very simple, fiber lines. They're 3 foot deep, and we're just doing a 2 foot by 2 foot square, a couple feet deep, fiber line, boom, go to the next one. But there was 12 of them. So we're going hitting these 12 fiber lines. But it was all rock.
Yes.
And it was all rock. And it doesn't
Yes.
matter. I mean, there's some artists for hydrovacing. Some guys that are so good, they don't get clean. But I feel like, at least from all the hydrovacing I've done, as soon as you introduce rocks into the situation,
That's it.
they're spraying back
It
on
all
you.
comes
You're
right
getting,
back.
You're getting
Yep.
mud on you. So me and Kenny are out here, and also during a thunderstorm. So we're soaking wet just from the rain. And at that point, I was kind of like, I don't even care anymore how clean I am at the end of this, because they're not even going to care. They're all in their cars watching me do all these,
Of course.
these
Yep.
potholing jobs. So I've got dirt everywhere. I'm covered in dirt. I've been just trying to slap these 12 holes together and get out of there and be done. Well, I was flying out that day, and I was flying back here to Florida. And Kenny's wife, her name's Alma, and we're driving back, and we're in Kenny's van. Or I was in the truck, and Kenny's in his van. He's like, "You ain't gonna be able to come into my house, and I'm gonna have a cow.
Not wearing that. Yeah.
You're gonna have to rinse out outside." I'm like, "Oh, great. I've got my flight in a couple hours." So it's probably 35, 36 degrees out. And Kenny's like, "The hose is over there. You're gonna have to rinse yourself down." So I'm out, putting the hose over top of me in my underwear and shivering. And I've got, I'm trying to get mud off me. And I just remember I was sitting on that airplane that night. I sat next to this poor lady that was sitting. I probably smelled, but it wasn't. It was just dirt. But I was just,
Thankfully,
going
yeah.
like this. I had mud in my hair, and I'm kind of flicking. I kind of looked at my seat after I got off the plane. There's just like mud crust everywhere. I was like, yeah, that wasn't the best day in the world, but it works out.
No, I agree. When it comes to the hydro thing, and I see some of your stuff too. I was always more prepared early on.
Yeah.
The older we get and the longer we do this stuff, you realize, like you say, sometimes I do feel like a surgeon. I can get out there and have my, my button down, whatever it may be, dress pants on, things, and sometimes they're surprised, like you say,
like
when you're ready to run the truck and they're looking at you like,
This guy's
man,
going to do it
really?
in Cole Haans?
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're like, yep. And most of the time I can perform pretty well, but like you say, you get into some frozen ground or some rock, and
man.
sometimes you just got to take it like a man and let it rip.
Well, and it's funny too, because we talked about live sewer versus stormwater versus hydro excavation. It's kind of like, if I'm going up to hydrovac, it's kind of, the worst thing that could happen to me today is that I get mud on me.
That's it.
It's not that I'm going to get sewage flushing back into my eyelids. That's when I'm like, all right, I would like to, get geared up here and get psyched up for the job.
I like to give that credit for never getting COVID.
Yeah.
We got a good immune
Building
system,
up immunity.
right?
Yeah.
We're
The
down there.
live sewage probably does help us with the immunity factor, I'd have to say.
This episode is brought to you by Vac-Con. Since 1986, the mission of Vac-Con has been to support, design, and manufacture innovative vacuum and high-pressure water cleaning solutions that deliver superior performance in municipal, industrial, and utility markets worldwide through their global dealer network. Today, their family of products include combination machines, industrial vacuum loaders, jetters, and hydro excavators that are used in an array of diverse applications by companies in the construction, oil and gas, mining, safety, and environmental industries. These machines are equipped to handle the toughest of jobs in the harshest of conditions. No matter the industry, Vac-Con's world-class industrial vacuum trucks and trailers are guaranteed to save you time, money, and effort. To learn more or to find your local dealer, visit Vac-Con online at www.vac-con.com.
Don't get me wrong. I moved out to the country. I say it's the country, a little ways out where we have a septic system. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, about a year and a half into the new home, the septic pump decided to give up. And so, of course, I'm out there dealing with my own sewer. And the wife came out and, oh, my gosh, what in the world? Hey, Just another day.
Yeah,
I said, at least this is ours.
Yeah, if you ever called anybody and they came up and they're like, this guy's doing it already. And they have no idea, like, oh, yeah, I sell sewage trucks, so I'm kind of used to this stuff.
Right,
I
right.
just called you out to help me out and figure it all out at the end, but I cleaned most of it. Probably like, this guy's crazy. He's out here, he's got his hands, in his drain field.
Right.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
But, no, so... we're ramping up for the dealer meeting. I asked this to No Finger Mike too. It's awesome to have the dealer meeting, and we compared it kind of like a family reunion. So
Completely.
You've got how many dealers did you say you have throughout?
So I'm doing
states?
9 dealers over
dealers.
16 states now,
Yeah.
and it's evolved a little bit here and there, but so a big group, and we are all very close. You know, and that's really kind of the neatest part of it is seeing everybody coming in and being exciting. Celebrating, the past year and the past and looking forward to the future. And again, I think that probably makes it the easiest to get up and go do our job every day is the bunch that we work with.
Yep.
I don't ever like to take it for granted because you hear horror stories, whether it's bad neighbors or bad bosses or working with people that just, rub you
I hate
wrong.
working with this coworker or that coworker.
I couldn't imagine living in that environment.
Yep.
I really couldn't because, we all talk to each other in the evenings. We're each other's family on the road. And without that, it would definitely be a different environment, but it sure is fun. It's exciting.
Well, and the hardest thing, like, what's fun about these dealer meetings, we're all together, but it's also, you got 9 dealers here. Mm-hmm. So you're bouncing around, this dealer, that dealer, all over the place. And towards the end of it, I'm like, I got to go talk to these guys. I got to go talk to those guys. But it's funny, as I think back on it, the more I do that, I'm overthinking it because we're all hanging out as a huge group anyway. So it's kind of cool because the guys from Pennsylvania get to talk to the guys from Ohio, that get to talk to the guys from Arizona, and they're all mixing together too, even more than they do in the wet show, because the wet show is a much bigger deal there with a lot more people at the show, where this is just a Vac-Con deal.
Yeah, and it's all about strengthening that network.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's gaining that knowledge from all those different folks and getting to know everybody and pass that knowledge from one place to the other or put people in touch with each other. Again, early on, people like Scott Ryerson and Linda Ryerson from ABM and these others that dealers, Mike and Maria Dahlman and Jenna and Lauren, and people that really kind of took me in and gave me that knowledge and were willing to give me a seat at the table every single time, that really, taught me everything that I know.
That's the cool piece that, like, I think back to my time the same way. I had the guys when I started in the Northeast, those dealerships, what we're talking about, like your identity, your theme, like those people, they gauged your identity and your theme of how you do stuff, whether you think about it or not. Like, they had an imprint on the way you do things. Same
completely.
with me. Yeah,
completely.
And that the nature in which we do the sales side of things, demoing, it reflects on all these different dealers that we represent throughout the country. Like, I started in the Northeast, so I have a big imprint from CM, from sanitary equipment, from Atlantic Machinery. I learned a lot, even though I didn't go up to Canada all the time. Like, I went up there probably maybe 2 to 4 times per year-ish, maybe closer to 4 times a year, whatever. But those times I went up there, I was in the trenches with them, and I was on the phone with them all the time. But they imprinted on how I do things, which it's funny to hear, like the Dahlmans and Bill and the guys from ABM. Those people, they create the Andy Armstrong pitch that we hear now, and
100%.
that tint that you put on everything has to do with that. That's
100%.
cool.
And remember, we're covering a vast area.
Yep.
Right. So I don't want to say jack of all trades, master of none, but in all reality, the benefits we gain from them in their specific territories, whether it's Benoit and Jessica and Helene and them up in Canada, they're dealing with different challenges than the folks, Jerry Saunier in Texas and Mark Wardlaw and those guys in Louisiana are dealing with different issues. So it's really cool in our position to really be able to take all of that and bring it into our knowledge base that's what we want to be. We want to be able to answer those questions and be a resource. Let's face it, everywhere I go, I look at guys when we talk vacuums, whether it be a 3-stage fan that can vacuum underwater or whether it be a positive displacement blower, or what their needs are. These guys use these trucks every day.
Yeah.
they don't go home and research these things on their phone all night in their personal time, right?
They're just getting the job done because that's what they're doing.
So there's a lot to learn from them. However, you also it's really cool when you can bring something to the table. I learn something every time I'm with a customer.
Yep.
And it's really cool when you can teach them something too, and everybody wins. You know?
Yeah.
And that's
and the other thing about this whole process we're about to go through this week at the dealer meeting, the thing I've learned that's been huge for me, especially from your guys in your territory, is every geographical area or territory does things a little bit different to where your guys, they sell auxiliary engine hydraulics a lot, to where I haven't really gone down that route a whole lot in the Northeast just because of the cold weather and stuff. And now I'm in the South. And I'm like, you know what? Andy pushes that auxiliary engine hydraulics. Palakia does too. Why don't I talk about that more? So now I kind of, when we all get together, it kind of opens my eyes to things that aren't in my identity or my theme, my pitch that I'm normally talking about.
Right.
So now when I'm like, hey guys, we're running auxiliary engine hydraulics in this truck, and you can turn the chassis off and jet lines. And people are like,
their
whoa.
eyes go.
Yeah, they're like,
I mean, it's mind blowing.
because nobody else does that. There's no other combination truck in the industry that runs auxiliary engine hydraulics.
That's right.
And it's shame on me for not talking about it all the time. But then when I come to something like this and we get to hang out together all the time, I'm like, oh, yeah, I forget. I need to put that into my pitch again. So now, like, coming out of this meeting, I know I'm going to start talking about that more.
Well, one of the cool things about Vac-Con, and this has always been beneficial for me, just personally, getting into sales myself. If the product will somewhat sell itself, that really makes my job a lot easier.
Yep.
Let's face it, okay? So having a good, solid product that performs, and I believe outperforms any truck, makes it a little easier. But the other side of it is we're not a one-size-fits-all. And it really allows us to take job application-based info and say, all right, guys, how are you doing this, and why are you doing it? What's the end goal? And maybe we can adapt to some of that. There's a lot of guys that aren't using a vacuum a lot.
Yep.
And if they're spending their time jetting lines 90% of the time, why not save that fuel and shut it off?
Yep.
Why not be safer with the quiet and save your ears and
then that 10% of the time when they need the vacuum, it's there, ready for them.
let it go.
Yeah.
Yep, let it rip.
That's the cool things that I grab, and the good thing about having the end user sales reps here is they get to grab some of that stuff. You know, if they're in Florida, they don't get to hear your spiel all that much.
Right.
They get to hear you here. And same thing with if somebody in South Carolina gets to hear Palakia from out west, they're getting a different theme.
Well, what I get a kick out of is I think, and this is probably something that'll be a little input for some outsiders, but I think we all go out and we have a great time.
Yeah.
And we do. And in the evenings we go out and we'll have a cocktail maybe and sit and visit and have dinner. How often are we talking about anything that doesn't pertain to business?
That's the funny thing. We're always
like we'll squeeze in maybe a bit of football.
yeah.
And maybe a little bit more family than football.
Yeah.
But 90% of the time we're talking business.
We'll be at the bar having a drink, and I think 99.99% of the things that we're talking about is Vac-Con stuff, because I think all of us are equally obsessed with it.
We live and breathe it.
Yeah, we are equally obsessed with it, which is a good thing.
Again, I think that's because we enjoy what we do.
Yeah.
And it makes getting out of bed every day
it's
easy.
even more fun now that we've hired some other guys that are coming into the sales force, like sales technicians. So we got Austin Whitman, Michael Britt, and Sean Zillman. Sean's been on the team for a while, and he knows the game. But these two new guys that are coming in, they've been, hearing my spiel all this time. But then when we get into these, long nights at dealer meetings, hanging out at the bar and being with all of our dealers and stuff, they're going to realize, like, oh, these guys actually don't shut up about Vac-Con the whole time. They are actually obsessed with it.
We can be exhausted.
They get to figure out really quick, like, all right, dude, see what we're getting into here? Like, we are like really all about this. But that's probably what has made, it so fun for me.
I would agree.
Is hanging out with you guys and doing that stuff. And I mean, it's made it awesome.
Yep.
But no, I mean, do you have anything you want to cover? I know it is only the first time we're sitting down together doing this. I was telling, Palakia earlier, it's like, this is episode 1. I'd have to imagine that I'm sitting down with Andy and Mike Palakia and Mike Selby
more than one time. But if
Oh, most definitely.
do you have anything?
Yeah, I
else,
don't
John?
have. I got to get on Rogan after this. So.
Yeah, you got Rogan. He's going to go to Austin after this, and even bleeding into being obsessed with Vac-Con stuff, we have a football game that's about an hour and a half in right now that we're trying to go get after too. So
Wouldn't hurt.
it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt to maybe get away from Vac-Con for at least an hour before we go dive back in again. So
It's all good, man.
Thank you for
I'm
sitting
sure
down
we'll
with
be
me, man.
we'll be talking about Vac-Cons up there as well.
yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you, Andy.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate it.